I met Lena at a time in my life when I really wasn't looking for anyone. I'd just come out of a long, messy breakup, the kind where you lose not only the person but also the version of yourself that existed with them. My days were a blur of work, microwave dinners, and aimless scrolling through dating apps I didn't really believe in. Then, one night, somewhere between boredom and self-pity, I matched with her. Her profile wasn't flashy. No over-edited selfies, no bias about loving to travel or chasing sunsets. Just a few pictures, one of her laughing on a balcony, another of her sitting cross-legged on the floor, painting. Her bio read, looking for something that feels like home. Something about it stopped me from swiping past. I sent her a message, something simple, forgettable, and she responded almost immediately. The conversation flowed easily in a way that felt rare. She had this dry humor, the kind that made me laugh out loud at my phone in public. But beyond that, she listened. She asked questions that felt intentional, remembered small details, and never seemed to run out of things to say. We talked every day for a week before meeting in person. I suggested a coffee shop downtown. She countered with a small diner she liked better, said the coffee there tastes like burnt hope but the pancakes are perfect. When I walked in, she was already there, wearing an oversized sweater and messy hair, smiling like she'd been waiting for me for years. I don't know how else to describe it except easy. We talked for hours, about music, childhood memories, our worst habits. She told me about her love for old movies and how she sometimes watched them with subtitles just to feel like she was reading poetry. I told her how I'd always wanted to move somewhere quiet, maybe by the coast, start over completely. She said, I think you will, with this strange certainty, like she already knew how my story would end. After that, we saw each other constantly. Dinner dates turned into sleepovers. Sleepovers turned into mornings spent making pancakes in my kitchen, her hair tied up with one of my t-shirts. She fit into my life so effortlessly it almost scared me. I'd wake up and find her humming to herself while feeding my cat, or leaving notes on the fridge reminding me to eat something before work. My friends noticed the change in me. I smiled more, laughed more, stopped talking about my ex. Lena was different. She wasn't clingy or demanding, at least, not at first. She made me feel seen in a way I hadn't in years, like she'd studied the blueprint of my loneliness and filled every gap. Still, there were moments that didn't quite make sense. She never talked about her family, only saying they were complicated. She didn't have social media, said she'd had bad experiences online. When I asked where she grew up, she smiled and said, here and there, as if it didn't matter. I didn't push it. Everyone has their past, I figured. One night, after we'd been seeing each other for about a month, I woke up to find her staring at me. Not in a creepy way, or at least, I didn't think so then, but quietly, like she was studying me. When she noticed I was awake, she smiled and said, you look different when you sleep. Peaceful. I laughed it off, kissed her forehead, and went back to sleep. If I'd known how many times I'd wake up to that same feeling, of her eyes already on me, I might have taken it as a warning. But at the time, I told myself it was just love. And for a while, that's exactly what it felt like. It's strange how slowly people change when you see them every day. Or maybe they don't change at all, maybe it's you who starts noticing the parts you didn't want to see. With Lena, it didn't happen overnight. It was subtle, the kind of thing you can excuse 1,000 different ways because you don't want to believe it's real. It started with her questions. Not invasive at first, just curious, who's texting you? Or what kind of stuff do you talk about with your coworkers? She said it like she was interested, like she wanted to understand me better. I thought it was sweet. But then the questions became more specific. Who's Emily? Why did you take so long to answer me last night? Who were you with before you came home? She always smiled when she asked, but her eyes didn't. The first real argument we had was over nothing. I'd gone out for drinks with a friend from work, just a small group celebrating someone's promotion. When I got back, Lena was sitting on my couch, quiet, her phone in her lap. She didn't even say hello, just asked, did you have fun? Her tone was calm, almost rehearsed, but her hands were shaking slightly. I told her I had, that it was nice to be out. She nodded, then said, you should have told me you'd be home late. I apologized automatically, even though I hadn't done anything wrong. She wasn't yelling, wasn't crying, she just looked disappointed. That made me feel worse than anger would have. Later that night, when we lay in bed, she pressed her face into my chest and whispered, I just hate not knowing where you are. I get scared something will happen. I wanted to comfort her. I told her I understood. I told myself it was love, that it's what people do when they care too much. Over time, the guilt became routine. If I missed a text, she'd ask if I was ignoring her. If I said I needed a night to myself, she'd go quiet, and then hours later send, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to make you feel trapped. It was manipulative, but so gentle I barely noticed it happening. There were small, unnerving coincidences too. She'd bring up things I'd never told her, little details about my past, like my ex's name, or my childhood dog, or the street I grew up on. When I asked how she knew, she'd laugh and say, you told me, remember? But I didn't. I would have sworn I hadn't. One day I came home early from work and found her sitting on my couch scrolling through my phone. She jumped when I walked in, quickly putting it down. You forgot to charge it, she said. I didn't call her out on it, I didn't want to start another argument, but that night, when I checked, I realized she'd gone through my messages. Not just mine, my email, too. When I brought it up, she didn't deny it. She said, you don't get it. People lie. I just need to know you're not like the others. There was a desperation in her voice that almost sounded like fear. I told her I wasn't, that she didn't need to check, but she only shook her head and said, everyone says that before they leave. For a while after that, things got better. Or maybe I convinced myself they did. We took a weekend trip together, her idea, to a cabin a few hours away. It was quiet, peaceful. For 2 days we cooked, watched movies, sat by the fire. It felt like how things used to be. But on the last night, she woke me up in the middle of the night. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, looking out the window. I had a dream, she said softly. You were with someone else. You didn't even look back at me. I told her it was just a dream, but she didn't respond. She just kept staring into the dark woods outside, her body tense, like she was waiting to see something. The next morning, my phone was missing. I found it later in her bag. She said she thought it was hers. I tried to tell myself it was stress, insecurity, love turned sour by fear. I'd seen relationships like that before, are messy but fixable. And even when she scared me a little, I kept reminding myself of how she looked the first night we met, how genuine she seemed, how much she said she loved me. The worst part was that I still believed her. I wanted to believe her. Because for every bad day, there was a good one. The kind where she'd surprise me with breakfast or fall asleep on my shoulder, whispering how lucky she was to have found me. Those moments felt real, and I held onto them like they meant something. But the truth was, the line between love and fear had already started to blur. And deep down, I think I knew something was coming, something I wasn't ready to face. There's a moment in every bad relationship when you stop trying to fix it and start pretending it's still fixable. I think that's where I was with Lena. Everything felt off, the tension in the air, the way her mood could turn on a single word, but I kept telling myself it would get better. It had to, because if it didn't, then I'd have to admit I'd let someone dangerous into my life. The changes came gradually, like water rising around me. Lena began showing up at my office unannounced, sometimes waiting in the parking lot with coffee or lunch. The first time, it was sweet, thoughtful, even. The 5th or 6th time, it wasn't. My coworkers started noticing. Someone joked that my girlfriend was keeping tabs, and Lena smiled too widely when I told her about it later. They're right, she said. I just like to know you're safe. She started staying over every night, whether I wanted her to or not. If I said I needed time alone, she'd take it personally. One evening, I came home to find her already there, cooking dinner like it was her place. When I asked how she got in, she said she still had my spare key from that time I watered your plants. She said it with a smile, but there was no humor in it. I told her she shouldn't have done that it made me uncomfortable, and she stared at me like I'd just insulted her. You're hiding something, she said quietly. After that, it was like walking on glass. Every conversation felt like a test I didn't know the answers to. I'd say something harmless, mention a coworker, a movie, a memory, and she'd find a way to turn it into an accusation. You sound like you miss her, she'd say about my ex, or I bet you watched that with someone else. No matter how much I reassured her, it wasn't enough. The worst part was that she still had moments of tenderness that felt completely genuine. She'd cry after every fight, saying she didn't mean it, that she was scared I'd leave. And every time, I forgave her. Because I wanted to believe that the version of her I'd met at the diner, the kind, funny, almost shy woman, was still in there somewhere. But the nights got stranger. I started waking up to find her sitting at the edge of the bed, facing away from me, completely still. The first few times, I thought she was sleepwalking, but one night, when I touched her shoulder, she whispered, "Don't. He'll hear you." Her voice didn't sound like hers, flat, cold, almost distant. When I asked who she meant, she said, "The man who watches you." Then she turned, smiled faintly, and said she didn't remember saying anything. That was the night I decided to start recording things. It made me feel paranoid, but I needed proof of what, I wasn't sure. I set up my phone on my dresser before bed, facing the room. When I checked the recording the next morning, the footage was mostly uneventful, until around 3:15 a.m., when Lena sat up abruptly. She looked toward the camera for a long time, then slowly got out of bed and walked toward it. Just before she covered the lens with her hand, she whispered something that made my stomach drop, "Stop watching." I confronted her that evening. She didn't deny it. She just said, "You shouldn't record people you love," and left for the night. For the first time since meeting her, I felt something stronger than guilt, fear. The next few days were quiet. No texts, no calls. I started sleeping better. I thought maybe it was over, that she'd moved on. Then one night, my doorbell camera sent me a motion alert at 2:47 a.m. I opened the live feed, half asleep, expecting it to be a stray cat or a passing car. It wasn't. Lena was standing at my door, barefoot, holding something in her hand. I couldn't make it out at first, it looked like a photo. When she turned it toward the camera, I realized it was one of us, from months ago. The edges were burnt, the center torn through our faces. She stared into the camera for almost a full minute before walking away. I didn't sleep after that. The next morning, I called her, not to yell, not to demand answers, but because I needed to understand. Her number was disconnected. I checked her social media again, still nothing. It was like she'd vanished completely. Part of me wanted to let it go. But another part needed closure. I needed to see her one more time, just to make sense of what had happened between us, to convince myself she'd been real. So I drove to the apartment she'd told me she lived in, a small building on the east side of town. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again, louder. Finally, the landlord opened the door to the hallway, giving me a cautious look. When I asked if Lena was home, he frowned and said, "Who?" "Lena," I repeated. Lena with the dark hair, 3B. She's lived here a few months. He shook his head slowly. Nobody's in 3B right now. Hasn't been for years. I thought he was lying, or confused. No, she's there, I've been here before, she. But he cut me off. Sir, 3B's been empty since 2018. He let me see for myself. The apartment was bare, no furniture, no decorations, just dust and empty space. I stood there in the doorway, staring at it, my pulse thudding in my ears. I wanted to believe there was some explanation, maybe she'd lied about the apartment, maybe she'd moved. But deep down, something about the way the landlord looked at me made me doubt that. He said, "You okay, kid? You look like you've seen a ghost." And maybe I had. Because that's when I realized something that made my skin crawl. Every time Lena had come to my place, she'd used her own key. But I'd never once seen where she kept it. For days after seeing that empty apartment, I couldn't think straight. I went back over everything, every conversation, every date, every moment, trying to make sense of it. There was no way she could have faked all of it. I'd been there. I'd seen her apartment, or at least I thought I had. But the more I replayed it in my mind, the less I could remember the details. What did her furniture look like? What color were the walls? Did she ever unlock the door in front of me, or was it already open every time I arrived? The memories didn't fit together anymore. Eventually, I decided to look her up. I searched her name online, Lena, the last name she'd given me. Nothing. No social media, no records, no trace. I even checked people's search sites, but every result came up empty. I started wondering if Lena was even her real name. That thought lodged itself in my brain and refused to leave. I tried searching the apartment address instead. There were old listings, old tenant records, archived news snippets. That's when I found it, a rental notice from 5 years ago, mentioning a tenant who'd been evicted after repeated disturbances and unverified harassment reports. The name listed wasn't Lena. It was Maya Voss. I clicked the name. It took me to a local news article from 2018. Woman charged after breaking into ex-boyfriend's apartment. Police say suspect believed she was protecting him from imaginary threat. The article included a photo. It was her. Same eyes. Same faint scar under her lip. Same face I'd kissed 100 times. I sat there staring at the screen, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. I read the article twice, 3 times, trying to convince myself it wasn't her, that maybe it was a coincidence, someone who just looked similar. But the more I read, the worse it got. The ex-boyfriend's name wasn't mentioned, but the location matched my old neighborhood. And then I saw the year. 2018. That was the same year I'd moved out of my old apartment, the one I'd left in such a hurry I barely packed my things. I'd told myself I was moving on from a bad breakup, that I just needed a change of scenery. But suddenly, I couldn't remember who that breakup had been with. I knew I'd dated someone before Lena. I knew her face should have come to mind, but it didn't. It was like there was a hole in my memory, something I'd covered up and forgotten how. Panic started to set in. I dug through my old laptop, through photos, messages, anything from that time. Most of the files were gone, wiped or corrupted. The few I found were blurry, faces obscured or out of focus. But in one of them, barely visible in the background, I saw her. Not Lena, Maya. Same eyes. Same half smile. Same woman. That was when everything began to unravel. I realized Lena wasn't someone new. She'd been part of my life before, someone I deliberately erased. Maybe not her name, maybe not the details, but the fear, the unease, the guilt, all of it came rushing back in flashes I couldn't stop. I remembered waking up one night years ago to the sound of someone whispering outside my door. I remembered the police telling me they'd handle it. I remembered the restraining order. But I didn't remember her name. I'd blocked it all out. Until now. Suddenly, her words made sense. You'll be back. You always come back. She hadn't been talking about love. She'd been talking about the cycle, about whatever it was between us that never really ended. I didn't know whether to feel terrified or insane. I called the number from the article, the reporter's contact listed at the bottom. I didn't expect an answer, but after a few rings, a man picked up. When I told him I was calling about Maya Voss, there was a long pause. You knew her? He asked. Yeah, I said, my voice shaking. We were together. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, you should probably know, she's been missing for 3 years. Disappeared after she got out of the hospital. No one's seen her since. My mind went blank. I asked him if anyone knew where she went, if they thought she was alive. He just said, every so often, someone calls saying they've seen her. Always a different name. Always a man who swears she's someone else. When he said that, I almost dropped the phone. My stomach turned cold. I asked him if he could send me the file, any photos, any details. He said he would, but when I checked my inbox an hour later, the email wasn't there. Instead, there was one new message in my spam folder. No sender. No subject line. Just a single image attached. It was a photo of me, sitting at my desk, phone to my ear, the same shirt I was wearing right then. And in the reflection behind me, standing in the doorway, was Lena. After that night, I stopped trying to sleep. Every sound in the apartment made me jump, the hum of the fridge, the pipes shifting, the wind outside. I started leaving the lights on because the dark felt too alive, too full of things I couldn't see. The photo, the one from that anonymous email, burned in my mind. I kept telling myself it was fake, maybe something pulled from an old security feed, but deep down I knew better. I knew that reflection hadn't been there when I took the call. For days, I didn't leave the apartment. My job called, my friends texted, but I couldn't focus on anything but her. Lena. Maya. Whatever her name really was. I went through every old file I could find, searching for proof that I wasn't losing my mind. But every folder, every drive, every photo was the same, fragments of my life with pieces missing, like someone had gone through and erased her carefully, surgically. Then, buried deep in my email archives, I found something. A message from myself. The subject line was, "If you're reading this, you forgot again." The email was dated almost 2 years ago. My hand shook as I opened it. "You can't let her back in. She'll find you again, and you'll think it's new, but it's not. It's the same story every time. She changes her name, changes her voice, but it's her. You have to remember what happened. Don't believe the pictures. Don't trust the mirrors. You've done this before." There was no signature, no explanation, just a photo attached. It was me and Lena, sitting on my couch, smiling. Except my eyes looked wrong. Distant. Unfocused. I wanted to believe it was a prank. Some elaborate trick I'd played on myself. But the more I thought about it, the more cracks appeared in my memories. Little inconsistencies I'd ignored. I could remember her scent, her voice, the way she laughed, but not where she came from. I could remember arguments we'd had, but not what they were about. I could remember her crying, whispering, "You'll remember next time," and me not understanding what she meant. That night, I had a dream, or maybe it wasn't a dream. I was standing in a room I didn't recognize, staring at a wall covered in photos. Every one of them was of me, from different times, different ages. And in every single one, she was there somewhere in the background. Sometimes beside me. Sometimes behind me. Sometimes reflected in a mirror. When I woke up, my phone was ringing. A blocked number. Against all logic, I answered. Her voice came through the line, calm, soft, familiar. "You shouldn't have gone digging," she said. "Who are you?" I demanded. There was a pause, and then she said, "You know who I am. You just never want to admit it. Why are you doing this?" "I'm not," she whispered. "You are." The line went dead. Something in me broke after that. I went to the police again, told them about the emails, the calls, the woman following me. The officer listened patiently, asked me for names and dates. When I said Lena, he frowned, typing on his computer. After a moment, he said, "There's no record of anyone by that name matching your description." I told him she also went by Maya Voss. He looked up sharply then, his expression tightening. "You filed a restraining order against her 5 years ago," he said. I froze. "What?" He turned the monitor toward me. There it was, my name, my signature, the date. File 2018. A restraining order against Maya Voss. I had no memory of it. None. The officer asked if I wanted to renew it. I didn't know what to say. My mouth felt dry, my hands numb. Finally, I nodded. He started typing again, then stopped. "That's strange," he muttered. "What is?" "She's dead," he said. "Overdose. The report says she died 3 years ago." For a moment, the room tilted. "That's impossible," I said. "I've seen her. She's alive." He gave me a careful look. The kind people give when they're deciding whether to call for help. "Maybe someone's playing a trick," he said gently. But I knew that wasn't true. When I got home, I checked the news archives again. There it was, local woman found dead in apartment. Same name. Same face. Same scar under her lip. I sat staring at it until the words stopped making sense. If she was dead, who had been in my bed? Who had cooked breakfast in my kitchen, laughed at my jokes, cried in my arms? Unless she'd never really left. That night, I dreamed again. I was back in my apartment, but it wasn't quite right, everything was slightly off, like a reflection warped by glass. She was there, sitting on the couch, smiling softly. "You finally remember," she said. "It's okay. It's always you who forgets." When I woke up, I was standing in front of the mirror. I don't remember getting out of bed. I don't remember walking there. But my reflection was smiling, and I wasn't. That's when it hit me. Maybe Lena wasn't just someone I'd loved. Maybe she was part of something I'd done, something I couldn't live with. Maybe I'd built her in my mind to carry the weight of it for me. And when I couldn't face it anymore, I buried her. Maybe she didn't come back. Maybe I brought her back. I don't know what's real anymore. I don't know if she ever existed outside of me, or if she's the part of me that refuses to die, the guilt, the longing, the obsession. All I know is that the email from myself was right about one thing. She always finds me. I moved out of the apartment 2 days later. I couldn't stay there, not after what I'd seen, not after what I'd started to remember. I packed what I could fit in my car and left the rest behind, the furniture, the dishes, the life I'd built there with her. I didn't even tell my landlord. I just left the key on the counter and drove until the skyline disappeared behind me. For a while, I thought distance would help. I found a small place in another city, paid cash up front, used a different name on the lease. I threw away my phone, deleted every trace of myself online, and told no one where I went. It was easier that way. No more photos, no more emails, no more reminders. For a few weeks, it worked. The silence was peaceful. I convinced myself she was gone, that whatever she'd been, real or not, was trapped in that old apartment, in that old version of me. I started sleeping again, eating again. Sometimes I even caught myself humming in the mornings, like the world was slowly settling back into place. Then one night, I heard it. A knock. It was soft, not urgent, not aggressive. Just polite. 3 taps, evenly spaced. The kind you don't notice unless you're already listening for something. I froze. My new place didn't have a doorbell camera, no peephole either. I waited, not breathing, listening for footsteps. Nothing. I told myself I imagined it. I sat back down, turned the TV volume up. Then came the second knock, louder this time. Against my better judgment, I opened the door. No one was there. But on the ground, propped against the threshold, was an envelope. No address, no name. I picked it up, hands trembling. Inside was a single photograph. It was me, standing in front of my new apartment door, reaching for the handle. Taken from behind. On the back, written in faint ink, were 3 words, "You remembered wrong." I don't know how she could have found me. I'd erased everything. No one knew where I was, not family, not friends, no one. I sat on the floor staring at the photo until the sun came up, trying to convince myself there was some rational explanation. Maybe someone had followed me, maybe it was a sick joke, maybe she'd never been dead at all. But the longer I stared, the more I realized the photo didn't make sense. The lighting, the angle, it was impossible. It looked like it had been taken from the mirror inside my apartment. That night, I covered every mirror in the house. Bedsheet, towel, newspaper, anything I could find. The place looked insane, but it made me feel safer. For a few days, it worked. Then, one morning, I woke up to find the covers gone. Every mirror bare again. And written across the one in the hallway, in the fog of condensation, were the words, "Stop pretending you're him." I don't remember writing it. I don't remember anything after that for a long time. When I came to, it was dark outside. I was sitting on the couch, staring at the blank TV screen. My reflection stared back. Only it wasn't quite right. The smile was wrong. It tilted its head and said, "You always forget this part." I don't know how to explain what happened next. The lights flickered, the air went still, and for a second, I saw everything at once, every version of her, every version of me, every conversation, every argument. It wasn't one story. It was hundreds, looping and twisting, always ending the same way, one of us forgetting, the other waiting. And through it all, her voice, calm, steady, the way it sounded the first night we met, saying, "Looking for something that feels like home." I don't know how long I sat there. When I finally blinked, the room was empty. My reflection was normal again. But deep down, I knew what that meant. It meant I was alone. Or maybe it meant she'd finally gotten what she wanted. The next morning, I tried to start over again. Coffee, shower, open the curtains. Routine makes things feel real. But when I looked at my phone, I saw a new text from an unknown number. No words, just a link to a dating profile. The bio read, "I think we've met before." The photo was me. And somewhere deep inside, something felt almost relieved.